Well, we are back. Yes, the Master Wildlife Filmmaking Podcast is back, but not as the Master Wildlife Filmmaking Podcast. We're back as Behind the Wild Lens. Yes, we have rebranded. I won't go into the details now because I've already done that. But here we are. Behind the Wild Lens is the new podcast name, and we're moving forward with some incredible guests. It's been too long. I've been off the air for over a year, and that was due to workload and trying to make everything fit into a short space of time. But then suddenly a whole year went by, and I realized I needed to get back to doing these. And so we're coming back hot with some great guests this season. I hope you subscribe. Please do, wherever you're listening to this podcast. It's so important for us podcasters. That's what we are. We're podcasters. So important for us podcasters, for you guys to subscribe to support these podcasts. Why? Because numbers matter. Listening numbers matter. It's how we get advertising. It's how we get funds to create these episodes. And up until now, there have been really very little funds to do this. But to make it sustainable and to keep these podcast episodes coming, I do need to make sure that we get the numbers up, people subscribe, and we make it sustainable so that you get all this incredible content. I get to talk to these incredible guests. So please do go to wherever you subscribe, wherever you're listening today. Subscribe to the podcast, the Behind the Wild Lens podcast, and also leave a review. If it's possible for you to leave a review, I would love that. Give it a star rating as high as you think worthy, and leave us a comment. That would be really helpful as well. So very much appreciate it. Today, my guest is someone who he's just one of the nicest guys I've ever had on the podcast. Really, really nice guy. I had the pleasure of working with him back a couple of years ago, working for Planet Earth 3, and we didn't get to meet. It was over Zoom calls and from afar because of COVID and the pandemic. But it was a pleasure working with him, and it was an absolute pleasure chatting with him for the hour or so that I did. Freddy Devas is the producer, director of the human episode of Planet Earth 3. And what a great episode it was. What a great series it was. And it is. It's been a couple of months now since it came out, and it has been a little while since I spoke with Freddy. I'm recording this after the fact. But there's so much to learn in this podcast, not only about the behind the scenes of how the show went together, but also about how Freddy got into the industry and what he's doing now, because he's moved on and is working for another company doing incredible things. Here we go. Let's get into it with Freddy Devas. Morning, Freddy. I should say good evening. It's evening where you are. Morning here. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Really good, thanks. Yeah, having a lovely Christmas and New Year. And Planet Earth 3, as you know, is out. So thank you, Jake.
Yeah, that's fantastic. No, I mean, obviously,
it's your big part on that. It's really great.
No, that's fantastic. It was a pleasure to be a part of it. I mean, it's so wonderful to one, be part of something like that, and two, to get to see it with my kids and family and just be able to reflect on that. It's wonderful. Because
that's fantastic.
Filming those bears for a long, long time. And so to see them, see bears up like that on the big screen is fantastic. So it's really good. Good fun.
Well, Jake, it was amazing. Do you want to go into this now, or should we?
We can. I mean, it's recording, so let's do it. Yeah, let's talk about it. It's fine.
I mean, it's really interesting. There's two elements. Not only did you capture an amazing sequence, and you did it entirely by yourself. You went out there, you captured everything, and built together, what turned out to be absolutely brilliant and so enjoyable. And so many people have commented on how brilliant it is. But it also happened at COVID during the lockdown, during the pandemic lockdown. And it was so important for the morale of the whole team on Planet Earth 3 because very few people were getting any filming done at all. There were lots of shoots being set up and then cancelled, and you couldn't make it happen. And then suddenly we were getting footage back from you of these bears in Lake Tahoe at night. And it really lifted the spirits of the team. And I was like, it's great. We're still managing to achieve something. It was so
That's
good.
fantastic. It's so nice to hear that, because obviously when you're working remotely, you don't see that side of things at all. You send your footage in, you hope it's going to work for what the program wants. And so it's really nice. I appreciate that. And that's, that feels good. So I appreciate it. And that was a long time ago, of course. These things take a long time to put together. Well, but I don't want to go, I want to start off, but kind of have a format with these where we really want to delve into, your story about how you got to where you are and where you're going and what you're doing. So starting at the beginning, Freddie, what was your journey? When did you know that you wanted to be a wildlife filmmaker or in the industry?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I knew that when I was 6, I knew that I was really, really into animals. And then when I was 8, someone asked me what I wanted to be, and I said a zoologist. But I don't think I even knew the meaning of that word. I may have just got lucky. So for me, it was always just a yearning to understand more about animal behavior. Why are they doing what they're doing? And that took me to studying zoology at university. And then I did a PhD on baboon behavior in Namibia. And during that time, I was getting more and more into photography. So after I finished on the baboon PhD, I helped out on another study, which was about the bushmeat trade in Central Africa. So getting more into the realm of human stories interwoven into the natural world, and conservation stories. And then I went into wildlife filmmaking after that. And it was a really easy fit because I loved imagery and I was fascinated by the animal world.
That's fantastic. So when you obviously you pursued a career in that direction, you knew you were heading that way. What was it? What was your first position that really, you took on that made you feel like, okay, I'm here. I'm doing what I want to do.
Yeah, there are a few, I suppose. The first job was doing research for a program all about visual anthropology. It was really conceptual. It was really academic. I really enjoyed it. That was just for a few months. And then I got a job being the sound man on a series called Meerkat Manor, which was huge in the US at the time. And I got that role not because I knew loads about recording sound. I knew a little bit, but because I'd done my PhD on baboon behavior, and the office next door to me was the Meerkat office. So it was at Cambridge University, and the Meerkat office, I knew all the PhD students, I knew the postdocs, and I knew their research. So the cameraman, Ted Giffords, who recommended me for the role, he'd been picked, and he said, could I have Freddy as my soundie? He said, I really need someone who can help predict the behavior. And that was such a great job. 6 months in South Africa, filming the meerkats. And I actually really think that the background in researching animal behavior helped me out a lot. So shall I give you a long, it'll take about a couple of minutes to explain.
Good. Yeah. Let's hear it.
There was this time when there was a very small group of around 5 meerkats in it. That's about as small as they can be to survive as a group. And there was the dominant female and her subordinate sister, who was actually older than her. Now, the subordinate sister was very heavily pregnant and went down and had pups. And we knew she'd had pups because she came up without the pups in her belly. And so at that point, she's going to be down underground in the burrow for several days before she comes up with them. So what's the point of sticking on that story? But I knew from having read the literature that because her sister was dominant and was also pregnant, she wouldn't want those pups to outcompete with her pups. So she might kill her sister's pups. So we stayed a whole day in the desert outside the burrow, waiting for the meerkats to come, and nobody came. And it's a fast turnaround show where you want to be getting the family dramas that are unfolding every day. And so I said, please, can we give it just one more day? Just one more day. And around me, there were others that were saying, no, come on, let's go to a group where something's happening. Nothing's happening here. So slow. So we went back the next morning and we saw the younger sister, the dominant sister, actually come up with a pup that she'd killed in her mouth. I don't know why she brought it up, but we captured that moment in the story. She was still pregnant. She gave birth a couple of days later. So we were able to go, God, it's really tough. You'll even kill your sister's offspring to make sure that your offspring have a better chance of survival. And that was very important in such a small group as the one we were filming. So that was a key moment to capture.
I mean, it's incredible how many times the money shot is got on in the 11th hour, isn't it? I mean, in this industry, it just that comes, it plays a role over and over. It's like you waiting, nothing, and you wait that little bit extra, and you manage to get it. So many times when I was hosting with National Geographic, we would have that scenario of just nothing, and then it would pay off. And that, should we go somewhere else? Should we, what do we do? And just having those instincts to know. And what I love about that is, I say to people a lot of the time, people are so worried about gear. They want to be a filmmaker. They're so worried about the camera and how am I going to do this? And what, should it look like this? And it's knowing the behavior, having that expertise to know when to stay behind because something may be unfolding that you don't see, that I mean, is huge from the point of view of you having that experience, that expertise, and going out and holding a mic and not having that much, sound experience. It doesn't matter. We actually, well, interestingly enough, my wife, my now wife, who I met while I was filming Bears here in 2005, we took her on an expedition out to the Amazon before I was married to her, and we took her out to be a production assistant and hold the sound boom. And we didn't do it because she had any knowledge of filmmaking at all. We did it because she was an expert with bears. She had exceptional, behavioral experience with multiple types of species. And it just was a great fit. She was ready to take that on. And that is so much more valuable in so many ways than learning the gear or learning, specific things. And I think that's a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you were in the field for 6 months?
For 6 months, a kind of 5 weeks on, 4 weeks off, 5 weeks on, something like that, sometimes 6 weeks. But that was a fantastic project. Really, really wonderful. And after that, I then went and worked at Icon Films for a stint and worked on a series called Nick Baker's Weird Creatures, where we went off to Madagascar and discovered these amazingly, curious and strange creatures, and he'd explain what they were all about. And then after that, I got my first job in the BBC on Frozen Planet 17 years ago from now. And then since then, I've been in the BBC all the way up until 5 days ago when I started in a new job in a new company. So,
oh wow! Well, let's get to that because I want to just go back a little bit still. In terms of when you're making that progression between, you worked on Meerkat Manor, you went over to Icon Films, then you got into the BBC. What were the instigating factors? I mean, were you chasing that? That moving to them? Were these jobs coming to you? How did that work? Because I know so many people are stuck. Like, do I, send emails out? Do I just keep hassling people trying to get into a position? What was it that got you into those positions?
I think the truth is that it was my knowledge of the meerkat research that got me the meerkat job. I then built connections over 6 months within the industry, within the camera talent. So Ted Giffords who was the one who recommended me for the soundy role on Meerkat Manor. He worked a lot at Icon, and he came back and said to the Icon team, you should think about Freddy. And my first job at Icon was very fortuitous. the presenter, Nick Baker, really wanted someone with primate experience and who could speak French. And so they had a team going out to Madagascar, but he really, really wanted someone with those areas of so that skill set. And so Harry Marshall called me up 2 days before the shoot and said, right, you've done a PhD on primates and you speak French, so how about going to Madagascar? And that was amazing. And then they sent me on a 1-day sound course. And the next day I was on a flight to Madagascar, and the following day I had the presenter on a radio mic, the contributor on a radio mic, I had the boom capturing Atmos sound, and we were walking down a really busy street, and the cameraman actually got hit by a car. I mean, not badly, but really properly bumped. It was a really hectic scene, and I was there thinking, wow, I'm in the deep end. You know,
right.
if I get the sound wrong, then so that was a, you know, sink or swim moment, but luckily it all went well, and we got
Great.
2 1-hour programs out of that 3-week trip, and yeah, that was fantastic and a good introduction into fast turnaround TV. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
I think, you know, doing sound, one of the things that people don't realize is that the pressure on the sound person to know when they haven't got the sound, to be able to say, cut, you know, we need to do this again because I need to get good audio. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. I mean, so many other things can go wrong in a shoot and you can get away with it, but bad audio, we all know bad audio is just bad audio, right? Makes things unwatchable. So that's huge. So, okay. So then you're in with the BBC. What was the progression in the BBC? Because you're a director. But did you start out as that, or did you get in and then start your way up?
No, so I had got to assistant producer in Icon Films, and then I took a researcher role in the BBC. So I dropped down a rung on the ladder to be able to work on Frozen Planet. And why did I get a job on Frozen Planet? I mean, I think it's because what I could talk about was my field experience. So having, and not everyone's going to have the opportunity to do this, but with the baboons, I spent 22 months in the Namib Desert in Namibia, following the baboons day in, day out, from dawn till dusk, observing them, trying to understand what they were doing, understand the reasons behind their behaviors. So that shows a certain level of dedication. It also brings about that important factor of patience, which is all important. Those decisions as to, do you leave the animal that you're on that doesn't seem to be doing anything and go to a different animal to try and capture that behavior? Unbelievably difficult decision to make in the field so often. And if you get it wrong, you can just get a run of like, oh, switching characters, you should have stayed with that one. I had a moment filming a young albatross on South Georgia in the Antarctic, and we were waiting for it to fledge. It's its first ever flight, and once it takes off, it won't come back to land for 5 years. So it's this hugely important moment in its life history, and we're waiting on a bird. So we got there before dawn. We'd stay with it all the way through to dusk. It wasn't going to take off at night. So we go back to the same bird. It looked like it was ready to go. We waited 10 days. 10 days to get that shot. And then when it got, the cinematographer, John Aitchison, filmed it absolutely beautifully, held it in focus, let it go just as it drifted past the iceberg. It was an amazing shot he got. And he had nerves of steel, because I was there going, oh God, I really think we should change to this one. Or I really think we should capture some of that mating courtship that's happening over there, because that's amazing and it's happening right now. And he was like, this is the shot we need to get. And we should stay because we know this individual. Let's just be patient. And it paid off. It was amazing.
That's huge pressure, right? Because for the camera person, I mean, you know, nailing that shot when it happens after 10 days, if you screw that up, it's that's a nightmare. Oh, that's
there are very few examples I've got where you wait that long for one shot.
Yeah.
That did seem really extreme.
And of course, that comes down to budget as well, right? I mean, you've got to have the budgets in place to be able to be in a place where you can wait that long, right? I mean, I'm assuming, and certainly knowing from a lot of the shows I've been on, you know when your budgets are running out, and you know when it's like, okay, look, we've waited 2 days, we're moving on. We don't have 10 days.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that was Antarctica 3D, is that correct?
No, that was on Frozen Planet, the first one. And yes, afterwards, I then worked on Seven Worlds, One Planet on the Antarctica program for that. And then on an IMAX film called Antarctica 3D. So I love that region. So I try to get back there whenever I can.
Yeah. And you actually, you filmed on that as well, didn't you? Did you actually, were you camera operating at some point on that?
I mean, Jake, I can press the button, I am not going to pretend to be a cameraman in any shape or form. I have done some camera work. I love time-lapse photography, and I've done lots of time-lapse shots in lots of shoots I've been on. And that I love getting involved with. And I have been behind the camera, very simple, try and keep it in focus, get the exposure roughly right, and know when to press the record button. But I'm not a cinematographer at all.
Fair enough. I saw some pictures, but I mean, of course, everyone has a picture by a camera at some point. So,
I see. Yeah, no, I have done some filming on the Phantom HD Gold, that first high-speed camera that came out. I used to sort of often be B camera on that on certain shoots, and I've done things, but I mean, it's awful, like I'm so disappointed with my footage. My focus is not very good.
Come fast forward to today, right? Planet Earth 3 obviously has just come out in the last, I think probably it's been out for a couple of months, I guess, because it just ended in the UK, didn't it, a few weeks ago? So I don't know,
yes.
10 weeks ago or so it came out. The production on a show like that, I mean, we're talking typically 4 years in production, but I think we're talking 6, are we, for Planet Earth 3 with COVID?
I think there were some people on it considerably longer than 5 years. I'm not sure if anyone quite made it to 6 years, but I was on it for 4.5 years, and lots of people were on it for 5 years. We lost a year due to a year's worth of filming due to the pandemic, apart from you. Working with you,
it's just me.
Managed to make some magic happen. But other than that, So typically they do take about 4 years, and this one was around 5 years. It's a huge undertaking, especially as for me that dominated my life for 4.5 years just to make 1 hour of TV.
Yeah,
I mean, process.
It's astonishing. So we know obviously there are multiple people out in the field, right? Gathering stories. How many of those stories never make it to the screen? Is that a large number? Is it none? Are there people out there who just don't get the sequences that were expected or hoped for that never make it into the program?
I mean, the first year is spent researching lots of stories, generally speaking. And then you might do the odd recce and go out or speak to someone locally. We did that for a few stories. See, wow, there's a story of a hyena walking through a city in Israel. That sounds really promising. And encourage them to go out for a night or two, see what footage they can get, and then make a decision based on that. Or you might go out there and do a reconnaissance mission to see what it's like. Then you pick the stories that you really want to film in earnest. How many of those hit the cutting room floor is so much down to luck. So on the human episode, there weren't really any stories that hit the cutting room floor. We used everything. But on Antarctica for Seven Worlds, One Planet, there were 3 stories that didn't make it. Now that's because when I joined, we had a 1.5 years to film. And in Antarctica, there's not much you can film in the Antarctic winter because it is so dark and so ridiculously cold that it makes it very difficult. But mainly it's because it's so dark. So you've got these short summer months where you've got to film a lot. And we only really had 1 Antarctic summer and 2 Antarctic springs. and one Antarctic autumn. So we didn't have much time. So at that point, I thought we need to fill the film fuller than it will actually be, because you never know. Climate change might mean that the behavior doesn't happen, bad luck, technical gear equipment, the batteries freeze up or whatever it is. We just happened to be really lucky and all our stories came good. So then in the edit, we were lucky and we were going, right, we can't fit these all in. The other thing about that is that some stories you go out there thinking, I want to talk about, we filmed a story about an albatross chick that's in South Georgia. And because of climate change, the winds are getting stronger in that region. And the albatross chick gets blown off its nest. The adult returns to the nest and it's looking down at its albatross chick, but it doesn't recognize it as its chick, because the only cue it uses to recognize its chick is if it's on its nest. Scientists know this because they've swapped chicks around on different nests, but the parents keep feeding them as if they're their own chicks.
Wow.
And that's because across millennia, if the chick is on the nest, it's your chick. It's so unlikely that it would have been blown off, but because of climate change, now they're getting blown off. So the parent doesn't help the chick back onto the nest. The chick has to get back onto its nest. Going to film that, we didn't know whether we would get that story. We knew that we would get stories of big storms hitting that region, and we could see what that meant for the adults, and we could see what that meant for the chicks. Sometimes you get mortalities, but we didn't know if a chick was actually going to make it back onto the nest. It just so happened that we did film a chick getting back onto the nest. So that meant that turned from a 4-minute sequence into a much longer sequence. And so because of that, you've got this great character story within a big picture story around climate change, which is surprising. It's not melting ice, which is what you'd expect to see.
Sure.
And so that elongated that sequence. And so we lost some sequences. But I'm really happy to say that, you know, we filmed snow petrels on the Antarctic plateau, you know, right up on this plateau, 3,000 meters up, you know, wow, on a sheet of ice that's a mile high. It's incredible to get a team even out there. Beautiful sequence. So I was really sad that we couldn't use it. But we then offered it up to Frozen Planet 2, and the producer on the Antarctic episode had gone, well, I filmed during COVID and we lost some stories that we couldn't film during that time. So she then used it in her program. So that's great. So all 3 of those sequences ended up in that program. So it's fantastic that they got used in the end.
Yeah, so nice to be part of a production house like the BBC, right, where you can actually share that footage around and reuse it. That's fantastic. I recently got introduced to athletic greens as a way to optimize for better gut health, get more energy, and optimize the immune system. So what is this stuff? Well, with one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. It's a lifestyle-friendly brand, which means whether you're eating keto or paleo, vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, it's going to work for you. Contains less than 1 gram of sugar. There's no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting good. And for every purchase, Athletic Greens is going to donate to organizations helping to get nutritious food to kids in need, including No Kid Hungry here in the US. In fact, in 2020 alone, Athletic Greens donated over 1.2 million meals to kids. And not only that, Athletic Greens is a climate neutral certified company. Again, in 2020, Athletic Greens purchased carbon credits to support projects protecting old-growth rainforests. That's huge. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with the convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. So to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do to get this deal is visit athleticgreens.com/emerging. That's EMERGING. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/emerging to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Now back to the show. Back to Planet Earth 3, the human episode that you directed, which is incredible. Such great work. I mean, great stories and things that we've not seen before. And of course, you know, the opening scene of that rhino walking through town was just astonishing. I mean, not just for the fact that it's a rhino walking through town. The thing that got me more than anything was the fact that it was so unbelievably comfortable doing that with people following it with their phones, and it was so habituated that it was scary. I mean, to the point of being, oh my gosh, this creature's not even, you know, it's not wary, it's just comfortable being there and moving through town. How tell us a little bit about that sequence. You know, how easy was it to find that and then get that footage? I mean, it looks like it was probably fairly easy to get just because of the animal being so comfortable, but was it? I mean, obviously it's hard to tell.
It wasn't easy in the end. We did a 3-week shoot. It was in a town called Sauraha in Nepal, and we'd seen YouTube footage of rhinos walking through this town, and I thought, that's extraordinary. That was one where we then contacted a photographer out in Nepal, and he verified it and got some more footage for us. And then we thought, let's do the shoot. So we spent 3 weeks, you know, it's a night shoot, so we're up all night, which you're very aware of, Jake, having done it for the bear sequence. So we were there up all night, and there are various rhinos that come to the edge of town, and they stay right on the periphery of town. There's only one rhino that's comfortable walking right down the high street, and that's the busiest street in that town. Not only that, but it was around the time of Nepali New Year, so it was a festive season with lots of people out in the streets late at night. That's why we'd gone there, because we thought that's when you're most likely to get the shots, which show not just a rhino walking down an empty street, but surrounded by people as well. So in the 3 weeks we were there, it happened once. Just happened once that the rhino walked right down the main street. Wow. It was a really extraordinary event. And it's a wild animal. So it's extraordinary. And not only is it a wild animal, but it looks like a dinosaur, to me at least.
Yeah.
And so it's this juxtaposition of an animal that looks like it's been around on this earth for millennia up against shops selling, you know, all our like clothes and tat and everything about the very, very modern world. And what I wanted from that sequence was to set up the film. And importantly, Planet Earth 3 is a series which is based on habitat. So you look at grasslands and deserts and forests and mountains, and all the different programs of the past have been habitat based. But for the human episode, I wanted to say animals are not only contending with an altered landscape, but they're also having to deal directly with us as a dominant species. So I wanted a story that showed an animal you wouldn't expect going into the urban landscape, into the human world, but by the end of its journey, it's surrounded by people. And I think that did it in quite a surprising way.
Yeah, I mean, what was astonishing to me, I mean, I obviously went out and I filmed the black bears, and I was, you know, happy. I mean, the footage I get from those bears is incredible, you know, coming out into the middle of the street. And of course, I was so excited with the thought of those bears being in Planet Earth 3. And then, of course, the title card came out and there's a rhino walking down the street. And I thought, okay, the bears aren't going to look so cool now. Freddy found a rhino. But just incredible. I mean, I love that just, you know, that juxtaposition just between the wild and humans. And that's what I love filming, is that human wildlife conflict that we see so much of now. And what I really loved about the whole show, really, all the episodes, is this fact that at the end, in the making of it, Attenborough talks about the fact that, typically wildlife filmmakers do not get involved in, natural behavior. Seeing things happen, and it may be the turtle getting caught up in something, or getting, eaten by something, whatever the scene is, if it's natural behavior, you let it happen. But having people actually jump in and say, we've got to get these seals out of this fishing net, or this happens with me all the time filming the bears, and it's been an ethical consideration that when I see a bear that is about to do harm to a property or do damage to someone's car, I will do my best to intervene and not allow it to tear something apart. Not only because of the damage it can cause, but also because a problem bear like that then has consequences of its own with those actions. So,
yeah.
But it's a hard decision to make as filmmakers, because we're now having to rethink the way, certainly, us in the generation that have been, filming long enough to know you let it happen, you watch the behavior. It can be hard. You can be in tears sometime watching stuff happen, but it's nature. But now we're seeing stuff that is not natural, anymore. And I think the show really captured that very, very well.
I think if there's a human hand in the problem that the animal's facing, then I think it's very straightforward to go, right, we need to help this animal. This isn't right. This isn't fair. It hasn't evolved to deal with these challenges. So I think there's an example in Planet Earth 2 on the Cities program that I worked on. The turtles in Barbados, the hatchlings, emerge from the sand, and they should be heading to the reflection of the moon on the water to take them to the sea. But because of the city lights, loads of them head into the city. And that's a one-way journey for them. Wow. There's no survival rate for any of those that go into the city. So we filmed that because it was an important story to tell, but we worked alongside an NGO that were rescuing turtle hatchlings. So every single one of the turtle hatchlings that we filmed, the moment we turned the cameras off, it was collected, put in a bucket and taken to the sea and released. Yeah. And that was a great, great feeling. And we had that all put in place before the shoot. We knew that was going to happen. What's more difficult is when it happens right there in front of you, to make that quick decision on how to help out. I think I try to think ahead as much as I can as to who are we working with, so that if we see an animal in distress, they can do that work. And in essence, we can also film them doing that work. So for Planet Earth 3, he was filming the fires in the Amazon. We planned that shoot for 3 years before we went out and actually filmed there. And I kept thinking to myself, if we're going to be filming an animal that's caught up in the fires, it's a very difficult decision to go, when do you switch the cameras off and go and rescue that animal? Because those are human-made fires. And then I came to the conclusion, you don't have to switch the cameras off. You have to work with a fire brigade that are rescuing animals. And then you can film the whole story. The animals captured, but there are these amazing, brave souls that are out there fighting fires with very little equipment. They're doing it for the love of the forest and for the love of the wildlife in it. And that's, that's when we captured the stories of the porcupine caught up and the flames and the sloth that was rescued in the aftermath. And I think that's good pre-planning to try and stop some of those difficult ethical decisions having to be made in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a heart-wrenching sequence. And at the end there in the making, where you're actually there describing what's going on, and there's a moment where I think one of the producers maybe is pulling the cameraman back, and the wind changes. I mean, that's scary, and that doesn't come across as scary as it really is on camera, because I know, being around wildfires here, those things can change in an instant and you can't outrun them. I mean,
Yeah, it was amazing. For the very first big fire that we filmed, the fire experts said that it would get to places where I placed remote cameras, time-lapse cameras, and I placed the different cinematographers in different places, and they said it will reach them in 2 hours is what they were expecting. It reached them in 20 minutes, Jake.
Wow.
In 20 minutes. So all the plans that I'd put in place with the experts there had to change very, very fast. So we're running around trying to rescue the cameras that are going to be burnt, relocate the cinematographers so that they can get cameras. And that's with the advice of fire experts. But of course, they don't know what the wind's going to do, and they don't really know how much dry wood there is on the floor. And it just happened that we were in a tinderbox that day that really just went up. Surprising. I remember being in the Antarctic and someone telling me, look for the waves when you're on the rocks next to the waves coming in. The largest wave you see, every 2 hours, expect a wave double that size to come.
Wow.
And that was such good advice, because there was a team that were actually hit by a wave. They were, the camera was washed into the sea. They managed to recuperate it, but that was a really close call. So it's hard, you want to get the imagery, you want to be in there, want to be close, but you've got to stay safe. I mean, we were that whole month, we had no problems. No one got burnt. There was no problems of smoke inhalation. We were safe, but there were risks taken.
Yeah. And you just have to have enough people to be able to, I mean, when you're operating a camera, you're so focused on the image. What am I getting? Composition. Am I telling this story? Is this a sequence? That a lot of the time, unless you have a spotter, someone who can alert you to those flames changing directions, you never know. I broke my leg 5 years ago. I was hit by an elk while out filming, and I was knelt down. And I had a group of biologists behind me. We were all in the same location. That it was a capture and release of elk in northern Nevada. Helicopter bringing them in, hobbling them, taking samples, and then releasing them. We had filmed 7 releases successfully. The 8th one got up and spun round on the ice and came running towards us. Everyone dispersed, but I'm the only one kneeling down. And that's where, maybe having someone else with me could have helped pull me out the way, but I couldn't move in time. So it hit me and I snapped both bones in my lower right leg. Ooh. But it's those moments that even when I've had the experiences for 20 years of experience in the field, that those things can still happen when you're so focused on what you're doing.
Yeah. So that's a really key role for the director, to stand next to the cinematographer and pull them away when the risk happens. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. So, Freddy, we're in an era now where we have so many ways of viewing nature shows, right? There's all these streamers, they're still broadcast. There's more wildlife content being made than ever before. What does that mean for content creators, filmmakers who are looking towards the future? Story obviously is a massive, is probably the most important component. But what would you say is, like, what do we have to focus on now to really, make use of this thing that we this media that can do so many great things? It can entertain, it can educate, it can create impact. What should we focus on for moving forward into the future of natural history filmmaking?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question, Jake. And I mean,
you got a minute.
It's a great question. There are so many valid answers to that. I mean, I do think it's important to keep looking for fresh stories, and that can be portrayals of stories as well. I mean, every lion hunt is different if you've got different characters in the pride and their dynamics have changed. But if you can look for those stories that really feel fresh and dynamic, like Race of Snakes and Iguanas in Planet Earth 2, the opening of Planet Earth 3, where you've got those great white sharks and the fur seals off South Africa that end up chasing the great white sharks away. I mean, these are amazing new stories from the natural world. So there's always going to be a desire to find those. For me, it's very important that we also, as wildlife filmmakers, realize that we're in a climate emergency and we're at the start of a mass extinction, which is being caused by us. And so bringing attention and awareness to not only the big problems, but also the solutions. And that was what was so important in Planet Earth 3 for me, was to say, making a film called Human. So clearly we're going to talk about the animals that are doing well in the human environment. What are the traits that are going to do well, like the clever monkeys, the bold bears, the hiding frogmouth birds. But also we're going to deal with the major challenges. And the major challenge on the natural world from the human world right now is habitat destruction. It's not climate change. Climate change will be in the future, but right now it's habitat destruction. And within that, it comes from agriculture. And that's easy to understand when you think that half of the habitable land on the planet is now agriculture. And that all used to be wild places. And within agriculture, it's animal agriculture, because it takes so much more space to get, 100 times more space to get 1 calorie from beef as it does from a pea, a pea plant. And so that takes up loads of space. That puts a lot of pressure on the natural world. And so that's an important message, I think, to get out there, to bring awareness to that. But then what's the solution to that? And so that's why we went on to, the space-saving abilities of moving to a plant-based diet. But not only that, but in the future, we may see more and more vertical farms. And then you've got farms that are growing 350 times the amount of food in the same space. And that's
that was astonishing. Yeah.
And it's such a hopeful future, because, take that example. It's something that's really difficult to raise, because eating meat can be really a strong part of people's identity. And I understand that. I've spent lots of time with hunter-gatherers in Equatorial Guinea. I've spent years with the San Bushmen in Namibia that are hunter-gatherers. I not only then, but I've, been to Greece, where people love a barbecue, and it's really a strong part of their identity. So that's a difficult thing to grapple with, but it's still important to put the message out there. Well, if any kind of reduction in the amount of meat eaten or animal produce eaten, that can really reduce the pressure on the natural world. And there's that massive stat that we say in the film, which is that, if the global human population moved to a plant-based diet, then you've got the whole landmass of Australia, North America, China, and the European Union all could go back to its natural state. And if you think what that means for biodiversity, if you think what that means for carbon sequestration, that's a really hopeful future, where that's not going to happen. We're not all going to become vegans. But you can think, okay, I can play a part in that. And not only that, but we're seeing that that's the trend. That's the direction of travel. We're seeing people enjoying more plant-based meals. We're seeing the manufacturers producing a wider range of plant-based meals. So that's really exciting. And for me, that's really important, because we can't just keep talking about the fire.
Sure. Yeah.
And sounding the alarm without showing that's where the fire exit is. Now that's difficult in a wildlife film. It is really difficult, because it's epic to talk about, a lion hunt. These animal behaviors are engaging, they're gripping, dramatic, they're epic. But talking about solutions isn't always like that. So you've got to work hard as a filmmaker.
But so valuable, because I think that one of the issues that I think people are facing today is that there's so many great programs out there showing these issues that you can get this kind of overwhelm of, oh my gosh, without being shown a clear solution, you can just get fatigued by seeing all of this. And then people, it's paralysis through analysis. They don't know what to do. They can just freeze up and say, you know what, I've got to back off. I don't know the answer. So being able to provide those answers and say, actually, there are simple solutions. Insects are another potential solution. We made a program years ago about entomophagy and eating insects, and the role that farming crickets for making cricket flour that has the same protein as lean ground beef, but takes much smaller space and energy to create. And of course, people say, I don't want to eat insects, and of course I ate insects in the show, but it's not about eating an insect, right? I mean, people eat snails. I don't want to eat a snail, but what's the difference? And if it's a powder form, we don't really know what's in sausages. Sausages are full of all sorts of stuff ground up, right?
I think if you knew what was in a sausage, you probably wouldn't want to eat it. That's the truth.
Exactly.
And it's the same for mincemeat and,
Yeah.
I was brought up in France, and there's lots of horse meat in sausages, but when British people find out that they're eating a sausage in France and it may have horse meat in it, they're not happy about that. But they've got no idea because it's a sausage.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting study which looked in South America in a particular country where the cheapest form of meat was chicken, industrially farmed chicken. And then these insect protein meat came in. Black fly larva, I think it was, and but then it turns up in your mincemeat, or it turns up in your sausage. You're not seeing it as insects. You're not buying it in a packet in insects. You're buying it in a processed meat way, and that's and that fast became the fastest selling meat and the biggest selling meat because it was the cheapest selling meat. And there is something very, very exciting about both lab grown meat. And also this new form of protein which comes from bacteria. Like we eat bacteria all the time in live yogurt and things like that. But you can grow bacteria and then you can form this meat-like substance which is really high in protein. And it can sound icky, but it also might open up a kind of revolutionize our cuisine, which is really exciting. But for me, what's important about that is that you could provide the protein needs for the entire human population in an area the size of a European district. And that's it. And when you think that, 77% of the land, for agricultural land around the world is for animal agriculture, that's a huge saving of space. And that's kind of a wonderful thing for nature.
Yeah. And it all comes down to marketing at the end of the day. I mean, let's face it, if you're going to eat a sausage, it's because it's been marketed to you. You don't know what's in it, right? You eat it. It's a hot dog at a baseball game here in the US, right? I mean, it's all marketing. It's how we look at these things. And if we dissect the way foods are made, no one's going to want to eat them. But if we look at it as, well, this is the new protein and it's marketed in a clever way, then I think that will turn the tides. While we're speaking about sausages, this is a good time to bring in my son Bodhi. He's 7. Bodhi would like to know: did you guys stay filming the hot dog in New York on the street the whole time, getting that close? He actually asked, how did you get that close to the ants? Which I think is obviously macro lenses and what have you. But the broader question, I think, is how did you get that close, and how did you stay that close on the streets of New York, or was some of it done in a studio?
No, it was all done in New York City, and basically we were out there for a month, and we went around different locations on the first few days looking at where these pavement ant colonies were. And it was quite straightforward to find a location which was like, there's a huge pavement ant colony and there's a place with a whole load of hot dog stalls right there. And people are eating them, they're dropping them, and the pavement ants are just having a field day out there. But what was really fantastic about how we filmed them, the cinematographer was called John Brown, and he is, I think, world-class in his cinematography in general. But for filming ants, he's the man to go to. He's incredible, and he's been filming them for years across lots of different productions.
And hot dogs, or just ants?
Not the hot dogs. So he had dreamt up this piece of kit that he'd never had the time between shoots to build. And then the pandemic came around. We already had him lined up to film the sequence in New York City. The pandemic came, and we were left going, right, what, we had to cancel his shoot, but he still had the time. And we, do you see what I mean? We gave him some money towards that shoot, and that time was spent building this rig. And it's like a tabletop rig, a big square scaffold rig. And then the camera is on these kind of belts that move forwards and sideways. So in effect, it can go at any point within that square. So for an ant, it's within the range that you want it to be. Then we had the macro lens, and because it's a flat pavement and not outside we could get the lens skimming across the top of the pavement and right close to the ant. And he then had a joystick, and initially he put lots of controlled moves in. So he'd set point A to point B to point C, and the camera would track along that, and we'd have trails of ants, and we'd do that. But, after doing that a few times, we were like, oh, you're on that ant. It's carrying a piece of the bun. Oh, no, the camera's just moved beyond it. And you're like, oh, we should have stayed with that.
Yeah.
So he started operating it just freehand, just with the joysticks, just organically moving with the ants. And I think it really brings the sequence to life, because suddenly you're with the ants, you're with them on the journey. And then when the pigeons come in, you're right down at the ants level.
Yeah.
So that was a really exciting sequence to capture.
Oh, it was fantastic. It was so kind of unexpected, and then of course the ants they're almost getting home, and the pigeons come in and start not just pecking them up, but just standing on them. They thought that was a great sequence. They loved that.
Oh, that's good.
So we know you hinted towards earlier that you're working on something else now. Have you moved away from the BBC? Have you left the BBC?
I mean,
what's the transition there?
I'm working for a company called Studio Silverback now. I'm 5 days into the job. Studio Silverback are part of a company called Silverback Films, but they're a sister company, and their remit is to make films that have impact. Typically our success measures for wildlife films are threefold there. What's the budget that the commission brings in, because that can employ lots of people to do good work. When it goes out, what are the audience figures and kind of audience appreciation, and how many times does Planet Earth 3, is it trending on hashtag Planet Earth 3 on Twitter and things like that. So those audience appreciation, audience viewership. And then the last one is critical acclaim within awards. What do people within the industry, the wider industry, think of it? So those success measures are great, and they've been around for a long time. But for me, a very important fourth success measure is, what impact is it having on the natural world? And, our wildlife films will predominantly, you hope, be having a very positive impact. But maybe there are things we can learn from negative impacts. I know of stories in the past where people filmed snow leopards in really remote locations, and then that location got out, and then loads of tourism started to go and try and see those snow leopards. That made it more difficult for the snow leopards to hunt. So we have to be aware of what putting this wildlife film out onto a global platform does. I mean, generally it's going to have a really positive outcome, I think. And so this Studio Silverback is all about creating content driven towards creating a positive impact for the natural world, creating positive change. So that's really, really exciting. So I'm working on a feature documentary that will hopefully be out in 2 years' time.
That's really exciting, because that's what we were just talking about. I mean, just having something where there's impact, you can measure that impact and that's actually a question I had for you is, how do we measure impact? It's been so hard in the past. We want to raise awareness, right? I mean, I think every filmmaker at any point has said at some point, oh, I want to raise awareness. That's why I'm making the film. But it's like, how do you measure that awareness? And if there's something that can have a call to action or create some kind of impact on the ground that can be measured differently, I think in this day and age, that's really, really important. So sounds really exciting. Congrats on your new job. 5 days
Thanks.
in.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess your commute is still pretty similar.
Yeah, it's really close. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, and it's actually Silverback Films is, one of the key directors is Alistair Fothergill, who was my boss on Frozen Planet 17 years ago in the BBC. So, it's quite a small world, the wildlife filmmaking world. Yeah. So I know lots of people there already. But back to measuring impact, I mean, I think that's so important. If you look at films like Blackfish, which was looking at keeping orcas in captivity and what does that mean for the orca, I mean, that was a really revelatory documentary that I think opened the eyes to lots of people that love dolphins and love whales and love orcas and want to go and see them, but haven't thought, what does keeping an orca in a swimming pool really mean?
Yeah.
And that, I think, the share price in SeaWorld dropped by something like 82% in a year for that. And so a lot of people had to look hard about the welfare of keeping these animals in captivity. You look at another film like The Ivory Game, and shortly after The Ivory Game was put out, China banned the import of tusks, elephant tusks, into China. And I think within 12 months of the film going out, the exportation of ivory tusks had dropped by 50%. So that's not to say that was only achieved by the film. There are lots of other partners involved, but you can think there's some relation between that film going out and positive impact happening. We've done lots of work looking at different programs. I have in the Natural History Unit in the BBC for a year and a half. I ran the environmental impact strategy for the Wildlife Unit. And so we looked at Blue Planet 2, and you can see that when Blue Planet 2 went out, there was that sequence where you've got a whale that's got its calf that has died, and it may have come from ocean plastics. And after that program came out, the number of Google searches for ocean plastics went through the roof. And what's really great to see is it then plateaued and it remained consistent for more than 2 years until the data ran out. And so it spiked an interest in ocean plastics, and that interest has remained. It would be great to go further and to do an analysis on what's the consumer trends of plastic straws. Around me in Bristol, I saw loads of bars and cafes drop their plastic straws and take paper straws instead. It'd be great to see what has that meant and what's that meant for the amount of plastic reaching to the oceans. So there's some things with impact are going to be much harder to measure. So you take a film like My Octopus Teacher. I suspect you could see maybe the sales of octopus to eat in supermarkets and restaurants. Maybe that's gone down. I suspect it will have done. Mm-hmm. But I think what that film did is it showed that there's a man who's got some mental health problems, is struggling in life, and makes a connection to the natural world and to an octopus. And that octopus and that connection brings him back into his being, back into living. And I think we can all go away from that film thinking, what's my octopus teacher? What is it in life where I connect to the natural world? That type of impact is impossible to measure, but undoubtedly is having. So Sometimes it's really hard, but what I like is working for an organization which puts that as the main success priority. We want to get some awareness out there around the issues and around the solutions to hopefully enact some positive change.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, really fantastic, and I think it's so necessary. Hence, having those questions here. That there is, as I say, more and more programs being made all the time. That it's cyclical, I know, but we've got more ways to watch than ever before, and more people wanting to make those shows. That I think it's so important that there is more to it than just entertainment. Are you finding, is there any plans for short form content? Is it all series, half hours and hours, or are you looking at short form content as well?
I think there's much more room for short form content coming out of the impact space in particular. So the feature documentary that I'm going to work on now has an ambition to have an impact campaign that runs alongside the production for the whole 2-year period, or it'll start slightly later. And that looks to make 300 to 500 films. And they're going to be bespoke films that can go to like the G7, the G20, or they can go to certain corporations and show what they can do. So they're going to be loads of short form films. And I think that's what's great about the internet. That's what's great about YouTube, is that you can upload any length. And also the streamers, you know, at the BBC, when you make Planet Earth 3, you've got a 60-minute window, and you've got very little wiggle room in your 60 minutes, because on the hour, the next show's going to start. Whereas for Netflix, for Amazon, for Disney Plus, they're not scheduling it like that. So you can make, it's a 20-minute film, this is really good. But in the series, the next film is 35 minutes. Or, you know, there's much more flexibility in that.
Which is fantastic. I remember making a show for PBS, 24 minutes and 42 seconds. And hitting that, 42 seconds was, for real. I'm glad that we don't have to be quite so stringent now. Freddie, last question to you. If you have a single piece of advice for aspiring filmmakers and people who are filmmakers and they're just looking to, get to that next level, what would that advice be? It can be anything. It might be just about how they try and connect with people. It might be how they, think about making stories. What would you say is the most important piece of advice you could give to someone in this industry who might feel sometimes like they're banging their head against a brick wall trying to get on in it?
Yeah, that's a really important question. I think it's all about the passion for the subject matter that you're involved in telling the story of. So if maybe you haven't got a degree in biology, but you're passionate about telling this story, it's having a story that you want to tell. I think that really comes across. I think actually for any, you could say, the cinematographer doesn't need a story they want to tell. They just need to be really good at focusing the camera, keeping the animal in frame. I don't agree. I think having the desire to tell the story shapes how you want to tell the story, which shapes what the lens through which you're telling it, the perspective you're telling it. And so I when I'm interviewing people to work on projects with me, what I'm really, really looking for is how passionate are they? How, and if they've got a burning desire, but they don't have a certain skill set, then often there are longer term projects where you're like, we'll train them up. That will come with time. But what's fantastic is that you really want to tell this story. So you're going to get in touch with the right people, or you're going to think about it. And how's the best way to tell the story?
Yeah, I like it. That's so valuable. Thank you so much, Freddie, for taking the time out on your Tuesday evening there in Bristol. I lied because I want to ask you one more thing, because I was saying Bristol made me think about it. How important do you think it is the wildlife filmmakers are in Bristol? Because I get this all the time from my mentoring group. They're kind of like, I live in, somewhere out in Canada, or I'm here, I'm not in Bristol. How can I ever make it in this industry? How is the industry changing towards that not having to be at the epicenter of natural history filmmaking?
I mean, I'm 5 days into the new job, but my team at the moment are entirely remote in different cities around the UK. And so things are changing. But I would be lying if I was saying, it's easy to break into the industry if you haven't had face-to-face contact with people. That is more difficult route in. But it might be that you can come with a story. You know your area incredibly well. You know this amazing story about animal behavior based there, plant behavior, whatever it is. And then you pitch that story and say, I'd like to work on that story. And through that, you make the connections. And then you've got your foot in the door. So there are lots of ways to do it remotely. But I think it's great now because you can meet people on Zoom, on Teams. You can also see what they've done. You can see their showreel, or if they don't want to be a cinematographer, but they're like fascinated by this particular animal gathering, you can go out and get some footage of that, send through that story. So it is much easier than it was before, but there is a benefit at coming at a time, say when Wild Screen is going on in Bristol, and meeting lots of people face to face, because then you can convey your passion for the subject much more easily. And then you can it's just more fluid to talk about what you could bring to the project.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so valuable. And I lied twice because now you just opened up something else there. What is the most valuable thing for you in terms of when you find someone, when you're researching and you find either a showreel, or what's the most valuable thing for you to see to make you know that that's the person that you should be working with or you want to bring them on? Is there a style of showreel? Is there, just clips? Is it just raw footage? What's most valuable to you looking at new people and what they have to offer?
I mean, I think, Jake, I can answer that specifically with regards to showreels, and broadly speaking in terms of just generally looking at someone to come and join the team. With a showreel, I can be really specific because I watched lots of them. I think I want to see range within it. So if I'm seeing too many of the same type of shot, then then it's good to like, okay, great, put in a time-lapse shot, put in a gimbal shot, put in a long lens shot, show off your range of skill set. Don't cut it according to something that's going to be a sizzler to sell something. Cutting according to your skills. So when I see a bird flying and the cinematographer has got it in focus and then it cuts, I'm like, did they cut because the beat of music came in there? In which case I'm not worried about that. Or did they cut because they lost focus at that point? So show off your best shots and then really try to bring a different angle. So I'll be brutally honest here. A load of showreels that I've seen start with the drone shot, which fly at the same altitude along a beach. And it's a beautiful shot with the waves coming up. But it says to me, are you coming into the story? Are you leaving the story? I want to know, why are you at the same altitude? That just is very generic. And why are you like flying parallel? Are you approaching the sea? Are you leaving the sea to go to the land? So just think, I want a motivated shot, especially with moving the cameras. Why am I doing that? And I think people can get carried away in showreels with, this was beautiful. It's like, it's great that you captured a beautiful drone shot. It's great that you were there when the light was great and the mist was coming in, and that's fantastic. But really, I want to see more than that. I want to see an eye which tells a story with each shot, or not every shot, but with certain shots. So I think that's important, and fresh perspectives are so important as well. I think that's really key.
That's so valuable, so very, very valuable. I'm asked that a lot about showreels, how they should be, and I think today it's so easy to make a generic showreel. We see other people's work and we want to match that, rather than thinking outside the box and making something different. Really, really valuable. Freddie, thank you. Oh, go ahead. Go on.
Well, Jake, there's another thing, which is that, there's a pressure. People think, I need to go and get a shot of a lion. You do not need a shot of a lion. You need a shot of, if I see someone who's got a good shot of a fox in London, I'm like, wow, they had to stay up all night, or maybe not all, they had to shoot in low light conditions. These are wily animals. And then I understand, if I get a shot of a sleeping lion that's beautifully backlit, it's still a sleeping lion. I want to see, so you don't have to be I think sometimes there's a pressure to go to East Africa and get the
Yeah.
big game, and you don't have to do that. You can just film something beautifully. And I guess the shot that always comes to mind is in American Beauty, where you've got that plastic bag that's blowing up and up,
Yeah,
around in front of that garbage thing. Just always sticks to mind. That's such an amazing shot.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that in a wildlife show reel. Someone filming the journey of a plastic bag. I've never seen it. I mean, I have filmed it for Planet Earth 2. It actually got cut, but it was this amazing this plastic bag journey through a city.
Right.
But I think sometimes you don't have to be constrained by wildlife and big game. You can just get really creative.
Yeah. No, I think that is something people get stuck on. They think they've got to have a wildebeest migration in a show reel to be validated or have credibility. And of course, I mean, I remember, I think it was 2017 maybe at the Jackson Wild Film Festival. I think it was there. There was a show on pigeons in Paris. I think it may have been called Pigeons in Paris. And it's like, if you said to someone, look, just go and film the wildlife around you, and they say, well, there's only pigeons living in the city. It's like, yeah, but go and film it differently and film it, with an interest and a focus and tell a story. That's a really interesting story, right?
Yeah,
because
it's
most
fresh.
of us, it's fresh. We overlook it and go, well, why? Like the ants and the hot dogs in New York. I mean, fantastic stuff. Freddie, thank you so much. It's been great. I could chat for another couple of hours. There's so much we could talk about. Maybe at some point we'll have you back on and pick your brain again and see where you've got with your new endeavors. Really appreciate your time.
Not at all. Thanks loads, Jake. It's been great. It's been really nice.
Thank you so much for listening to the Behind the Wild Lens podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, then please think about leaving a rating and a comment wherever you listen to your podcasts. It's really important to keep these podcasts sustainable and to get new listeners. So I would really, really appreciate it if you could do that. Maybe just give it a star rating. And if you do have something else to add, leave a comment also. That would be fantastic. And also, if you're into wildlife filmmaking, if you want to try and break into the industry, if you're an aspiring wildlife filmmaker, if you're already in the industry and you want to network with other wildlife filmmakers, then head over to jakewillers.com. That's JakeWillers.com and join our free wildlife filmmakers community. We have hundreds of people inside there who are all either in the industry or aspiring to get into the industry. But either way, we're all wildlife filmmakers, and it's a place where we can network, discuss our work, show our work, and collaborate with each other. Head over to jakewillers.com and check out the wildlife filmmakers community.